to the podcast. Oh my goodness, it is getting that time of year. There are so many different celebrations, whatever you are celebrating this time of year. I want to wish you the best. And if you're buying gifts, I hope they are already purchased. We are signing up for a great podcast episode today. We've got Aurora Meyer, APR. She is out of Columbia Public Schools in Missouri. They have about 19,000 students, and they've got a really unique approach to social media. And it's something that actually I have never, ever had a school tell me this. And I was really intrigued, and I get it. And it might be something that you think about as well, especially if you are a bigger district. And so that's my teaser. You've got to listen to this episode. Aurora's got a lot of experience in communications. She's going to share her journey and also dive into a little bit of Canva. We love Canva. She's going to share some of her top tips for creating with Canva. And so you're not going to want to miss it. I am so excited to have myself another friend in school PR, someone that is so dedicated to helping others as well. So you're going to meet a new friend as well today and talk about meeting friends and sharing and the spirit of giving. You guys, we want this podcast to reach more people. So if you are listening and you have never shared this podcast with another school communicator or just educator that is involved with social media, like they deserve to hear about this podcast. So I would love for you to share this with them. I'd also love for you to leave me a review. But this time of year, maybe you don't have a lot of time for that, but you could at least, sharing is caring. Share this with someone else. And now let's get to this week's very helpful K-12 PR tip. All right, this week's K-12 PR tip is all about what to post over winter break. First of all, it's winter break and everybody's going to be off doing some things. You are not going to post as often over winter break. And if you choose to just take a break yourself, I'm giving you the permission, right? You can, some of the algorithm things could be affected, but it'll pick right back up after the break. So don't be overwhelmed with that. You definitely can post less. I would say, we still try to do about once a day, not necessarily on specific holidays. I mean, if it's like literally Christmas Day, your community doesn't really need to see a post from your school. Now, here are some ideas as far as if you do want to continue to post. One of the great ideas is this time of year, everybody's doing like a top 10 countdown or the top 100 songs of 2022 or whatever. You could share some of the top posts from your page or do a year in review and highlight some of the awesome, amazing things that have happened in the year 2022 in your school district. So that is a great way. Now, remember, in your insights within Facebook, especially on your Meta Business Suite app on your phone, you can actually sort by reach. And so you can pick out what are some of the top posts throughout your year. So that makes it really easy. You also will likely have some leftover like pictures from the month of December because there's so much going on. So don't be afraid to just throw it back to a few of the holiday parties or the ugly Christmas sweaters or, whatever they're wearing. And then also don't forget about your regular features. I typically share a staff shout out on Mondays, and Tuesdays I do a students who shine. Thursdays I'm doing throwback Thursdays. So if you have regular features, those things can still be scheduled out, and that will obviously count as content for your school. So again, don't sweat it. Okay. But these are just a few ideas. And if you have more, hit me up. I'm at Andrea Gribble over on Twitter. You can also email me direct. But now we've got a lot to cover in this week's episode and our interview with Aurora Meyer. So let's get started. Hello, Aurora Meyer, APR. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my honor to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. You're going to actually be doing a webinar for my membership group coming up because you delivered a great presentation in Chicago this last year, and I heard great things about it. But I also wanted to give a sneak peek for everybody to be able to meet you here on the podcast. So, Aurora, why don't you share a little bit about your background and your role as communication manager for Columbia Public Schools there in Missouri?
Yeah, so the long-winded version is I got into journalism because I loved sharing community stories and I loved the advocacy aspect that journalism has. And I got in right at the kind of tail end of the heyday of that. And so it morphed pretty quickly to be less of what I loved about it, less of that advocacy, less of that community storytelling. So I kind of hit that crossroads of like, what do I do next? And I started going back to school to get my post-bac certification to teach. I've always loved teaching, whether it's professionals like your amazing listeners or students in any format, whether they're young students or college students. And during that time, an opening at a nonprofit association for education came open that was everything I loved about journalism, but none of the nights and weekends and traumatic coverage that I didn't love. And at that time, it was about 15 years ago, social media for enterprises, for businesses was a pretty new thing. And my association was really at the forefront. They had reserved the page, they'd reserved their name on several social media channels. And so it was a relatively easy switch, but they didn't have a plan for like, now that we've built it, what do we do? And so I had the incredible opportunity to come in and develop that and develop a plan with strategic outcomes and grow that community. And it was amazing and wonderful. And I still am in touch with that incredible association and my former boss. But, just like anybody else, your skills grow and your interests grow. And over time, if you're at a small space where there's not much career growth, you get the support to look elsewhere. And I ended up at Columbia Public Schools, which is amazing. I get to do all the amazing things that I love, that storytelling, getting into buildings, finding what's new and different and amazing and wonderful that our community doesn't necessarily get to see because they're not in our buildings, and also contribute to that community building and community relationships in all of the other aspects. So I really like to joke that it's kind of like the perfect thing. I couldn't have asked or designed something better for myself. And I love it. I love telling the story of our school district to our community.
And how long have you been with Columbia Public Schools?
So I'm one of those people that chose to jump into public school education during the pandemic. So I joined in June of 2020.
Okay.
And it was one of those things where the first 2 years were much less of the things that I love, that fill my cup, that get me in buildings and help me tell those stories. But I also specialize in crisis communication and how we handle that with multiple stakeholders and multiple constituencies. And so it was a perfect fit for the thing that I love and another skill set that I have. So I had done a lot of that over the last 2.5 years. And though we are transitioning to more of a normal situation, it's never going to be the same. So there's always going to be some of that crisis elements, which I think you and I are going to chat about in a little bit as well. So it's really one of those opportunities that I just couldn't pass up, even though it was in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, you're among a lot of people that, jumped in at that point, and some of them didn't even know that it was going to be happening, but they were jumping in. And certainly the strength, the value that communications brings was definitely elevated during that time. So Columbia Public Schools, could you just describe a little bit how many schools you have, how many students, and maybe a little bit about your communication department?
Yeah, so we are one of 3 districts in the United States that is urban, rural, and suburban. When I started at Columbia Public Schools, one of the phrases that was sort of tossed around was, oh, there's no one like us. There's no one like us in the state. There's no others like us really across the country. And I said, that's cool. I love that we're looking at that from a perspective, but let's prove it. Let's go into the educational data that's available through various education data collection sites and prove it. Let's prove that we are unique. And I was able to put in our square mileage. We have 303 square miles. We're huge. Like I said, we're urban, rural, and suburban. We have about 19,000 students, and we have a pretty transient intra and inter district population, which for us means we have students that may start at one elementary school in September because their family moved here from out of the country, or because their parents got a job at the university, or they might move to a different school in the middle of the school year. So we have people moving in and out of our district pretty consistently, and we have people moving within our district as well. So we have roughly a little more than 19,000 students. We, like every other district, took a dip during the pandemic, but we're back up to pre-pandemic levels. And we employ about 3,000 people in our community. We are one of the largest employers in our community as well. So in addition to all of the nuances that come from having a district that is made up of such diversity, we also are really important to our community. And so that's one of our main stakeholders as well.
Okay. And then your communications team, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we have 42 buildings,
Okay.
and at our school buildings, we have our media specialists who kind of serve as the, I would say, liaison for sharing information back to our team in the district office. Our official team is 6 people. So we have our chief communications officer. We have me as the communication manager. We have a communication specialist to manage a couple of our special projects and really helps us handle the volume of requests and information that we get. Our 2 front desk women are incredible at our district office, and they are in our department as well. And then we have someone who is in charge of video and our cable access channel. And that's something that we have added on to and done more with differently over the pandemic. But some of those enterprising initiatives are things that we're going to end up keeping. So we officially have 6. We really have 2.5, 2 to 3 that do communications as full time with the perspective of our stakeholders and our community members as their main focus.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, awesome. Well, it's interesting. And do you know the other schools that are similar to you? Because you said you're one
I
of
do.
43.
And if you are that person, so if I'm saying your school district, please reach out to me, because I have chatted with a couple of you and a couple of different people along the way, but they are Killeen, Texas, and they
Okay.
are Las Cruces, New Mexico. So those are the 2 that are similar to us. That's it. So when you plug in some of the data points, you can see roughly the same student population, roughly the same free and reduced lunch mix, the same intra and interdistrict transiency, as well as the rural, urban, and suburban. And it's been really, that was a lot of fun. That was a project that I didn't expect to do, but I really enjoyed doing, because anytime you can prove with data, it takes your opinion out of the equation, and it's not Aurora, the expert, saying it's, well, the data from these amazing organizations proves, based on that information numerically, this is a correct or an incorrect assumption.
Yeah. And that goes back to your APR days, right? Like
Yes, it does.
when did you get your accreditation?
I was accredited in 2018, so I
Okay.
passed my test in September of 2018, and during the process, I didn't entirely realize how much I would apply it moving forward. So if you aren't familiar with the APR, it's the Accreditation in Public Relations. There are 2 organizations that really support that. They're the National School Public Relations Association, a little plug for them because they're amazing, and the Public Relations Society of America. And I'm a member and a leader in both organizations. And there's a lot of support to pursue that, but it is an in-depth, deep dive into the history, the theories, the things that make public relations unique and unusual and special, and how we got to where we are in everything from crisis communication to lobbying, and just all the different intricacies that come into play for this profession. So I am so glad I did it. It definitely changed how I approach my work. It's given me some common language to have conversations with leaders that I otherwise wouldn't have. And I think it has really elevated the work that I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, awesome. Well, good for you. I'm excited and thanks for sharing that. All right, so we're going to get into some graphic type stuff. You're kind of a Canva pro, and so we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, this is the Mastering Social Media for Schools podcast.
Mhm.
And as we were getting ready for this, I'm looking for Columbia Public Schools on social media, the school district, and I'm not seeing it. So I am really intrigued and I really want you to share with our listeners. We work with a lot of smaller districts, Aurora. So, my school that I do social media for every day is 300 students, K through 12. So of course we just have one district page because we only have one school building actually. But when you get bigger, you got 42 schools, and especially in today's day and age of 2022 and all the divisiveness, can you kind of share your philosophy and kind of what you guys do with social media there?
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to take a step back. And like I alluded to and kind of discussed previously, when I was with the Education Association, part of my job was staying up to date on research and trends and helping schools begin that process of creating an online profile in some way, shape, or form. And at that time, pretty much as soon as you could have a business Twitter or a business Facebook account, one of the things that I recommended is absolutely do that. Of course, reserve your name, but also start feeding content into at least those two spaces. And that was awesome because there was dialogue, there was communication, it was two-way, it was tapping into some community advocates that you wouldn't have otherwise known about. 2022 is very different. And now I am an advocate for, if you don't have it and it's not structured in a way that you're not going to just take public lashings over and over and over again, or somebody isn't going to come on and really transform the conversation that you're trying to have, don't feed it. It's a beast. It's never going to end. It takes some pretty significant skill sets in order to manage that from a volume standpoint, but also from a person standpoint. The vitriol that's out there really can start to affect you. And I don't want that for anybody. I definitely don't want that for the people that are in charge of telling the story of their schools to their community. So when I started at Columbia Public Schools, we do not have an official district Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram, TikTok. We don't have that as a district. And prior to my joining the district, the decision was made, and I'm guessing probably circa 2014, 2015, 2010, who knows, that was not the priority, that the priority was to give our schools their own social media. So their own Facebook page, their own Twitter, different ways for our schools to share their message. Because I'm sure just like in districts that are our listeners right now, we have found that our community loves their teachers. They love their child's teachers. They love the teachers they had. They love their neighbors' teachers. There is a love for educators in our community, and there is a love for that school. There is nothing more amazing to me than just the pride our community has in their elementary schools and our middle schools and our high schools. We are 3 comprehensive high schools and an alternative high school. And the just outpouring of love that they have for those communities is amazing. But there is a disconnect when we jump from the school level to the district level. And so even though our community is incredibly supportive, and we are so grateful for their bond passage and levy passage over the years and supporting our initiatives in general, there just seems to be that break between the love for the school and the love for the district. And so we don't have official channels for our district. We communicate through our local media. So I always like to remind, especially school PR people, your media is not your audience. Your media is a vehicle for your message. And so we communicate through our media, but we also have really started working, and truthfully, we need to be better about this, to remind our families and our community stakeholders that we strive for essentially one truth. So if you didn't get it in an email from the district level, you didn't see a district person interviewed yourself, you did not have a physical thing that was mailed to you from the district, then it has gone through a filter. And going back to that one truth, going back to the original source is going to give you more information than listening to your neighbor or listening to, some of the talk radio that we have in our community. And so going back to that single source, I'm grateful that we don't have social media to compete with that at the same time. And then that also lets our school buildings kind of boost that message. So our school buildings can share it as an original share from their building, and maybe gain some support in ways that if we had shared it as a district, we wouldn't. So that's a very long-winded answer to say, if you don't have it and you're not a small enterprise or a small school district or a situation where it's very manageable, then either we should have a conversation about what that would look like and how to structure that from a personal well-being standpoint, a community well-being standpoint, but that you don't have to. You're not obligated to jump on every social media trend.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I love that. I love that insight. And we haven't really had anybody share that before. So I appreciate that. It may be even some people listening might be like, hey, maybe this is a direction that we'd want to go if we have it. Because I think most districts do have that district presence. But maybe it's time to rethink that a little bit, and that's okay. I would imagine there's still some challenges. You said you've got media specialists at each school that are managing social media. So how are you training and kind of supporting that front line of folks that are managing the social media?
So it kind of depends on our buildings. Some of our buildings, our principals are handling some of that. Some of our buildings pages are run by the PTA, and it's mostly to share events and share, information from that perspective. Truthfully, we also need to be better about that. We need to be better about equipping our teachers and our principals and our building leaders with either asking us for help in responding to something, which most of them are very, very, very skilled at. But we could do some better training in that regard. What is a good thing to share? What does the research say? I mean, we have access to tons of psychology research, and we have access to tons of just social media behavioral research nowadays. So how do we leverage that information while also still maintaining that communication with our stakeholders? And I do think we could do a better job of equipping them with the information to do it in a way that is sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that really helps. So thank you so much for sharing that. So you do have some extensive knowledge of Canva, and I think it's the tool that everyone in school PR seems to really love. But before we get started, can you share your journey with branding and kind of graphics for Columbia Public Schools?
So the very short answer to this is I am not a graphic designer. I am incredibly lucky to be married to someone who has that skill set and who has that vision and who has been so patient with me. My husband has kind of given me some information and some basic skills over our last 18 years, but I will never be at the level he is. I remember the days of struggling, and I still do. I'm getting better at Adobe products. I think they're super valuable. There is definitely a place for them. Canva has some limitations, as we all know. It's not perfect, but it's just my brain doesn't work in the Adobe way, and so I started using Canva many, many, many years ago when it was a free service for nonprofits, and I jumped in and just tried things. And I learned a lot from failure. I learned a lot from, oh, hey, by the way, for some reason, the Canva line default, the space between lines is 1.4 instead of 1. So that's sort of why some things look weird and awkward on a regular basis for me. So I always make sure to set that to 1 before I do anything so that I'm not designing and then like, why doesn't this fit? And I'm trying to squash the font size and then it looks funny. And so my husband has taught me to, first thing, look at your space between lines, and second thing, look at your space between letters. That is often a very easy way to fix things. But I tried by failure. I said, hey, we need some social media graphics, or hey, we don't have pictures for these things. Can I go find a stock image, which is a whole other can of worms, but can I find something that is representative of what it is that I'm trying to convey in a visual format? Because when social media jumped from just text to adding in photos, we needed something to go along with that evolution. And that was sort of my beginning. I've, like I said, failed a lot. And last year, I had a conversation with the Missouri School Public Relations Association region that I was president of. And one of the things that came up was that people wanted more training in Canva. It's something that we use because it's intuitive, it's quick, it's easy, it's, you know, for districts especially, it's free. When Canva for Education came out, that was a huge game changer. And I said, well, I have a contact over there. It was a really old contact, but I know someone at Canva. I can ask, like, the worst they say is no. And so I reached out and they got me connected with Scott, who I presented with at NSPRA. And Scott was really the first person to say, like, yes, this is something that we can help with from a platform perspective and help you do your job better by telling you some tips and tricks, keeping you updated on the things that are coming next. He is sort of the first person I alert to when I have broken something in Canva, because I do break it a little often. But it's a tool. And I think as long as we all remember that it is a tool to help us achieve a goal, then the sky's the limit. So my journey started from necessity, needing some images, needing some visuals to go with social posts that I was creating, and has evolved into using it to help me tell the story, help me visually share information in a way that is relevant to the thing that I'm trying to convey and meaningful to my audience.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the Adobe products, and there's, other graphic design tools. And some of the people listening are very trained in that, but Canva makes it very simple and very quick. So what are some of the best time-saving tips that you would have when it comes to Canva?
So my thing that I always really like to make sure people know first and foremost is, if you have not figured out your district text color codes, that I think it's a 6-digit, truthfully, my husband would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking about this. But whatever your color codes are, have them already preset. Have your color codes as right there so that you can easily switch that into your school colors. Or your district colors, and then have all of your logos, school logos, building logos, district logos, whatever logos you're going to need, also preloaded, but with a transparent background. And I was so happy when Canva introduced background remover, because my one Photoshop skill that I'm fairly decent at is going in and removing the background. And sometimes you do have to get into that pixel level and find that teeny tiny square that's making something look wrong, and remove the background that way. So Canva background remover isn't perfect, but it is pretty good. And I really love that they've also added that pixel level delete and re-add tool. So if you accidentally delete a line that you didn't mean to, it's not hard to add it back. So logos, colors, logos with transparent backgrounds is crucial. And then the third thing that I recommend the most often is look at the template as starting point. We all have used Canva enough that when we're scrolling our social feeds or looking on Instagram, or sometimes even watching commercials on TV, we're like, oh, I know that template in Canva. You didn't change anything. You didn't even change out the picture or the call. Like, this is the exact template, just with your words. And so remembering that is a thing that people are going to recognize that, and changing it. I do talk a little bit for the APR process. One of the things that I do is I talk about law and ethics. And so though copyright doesn't necessarily apply to your Canva template, if you think about it in that way, like think this is a copywritten piece of work and I need to change enough of it that it is a different piece of work, it will feel more natural to you. It will feel more organic and purposeful and cohesive with your audience. And so looking at Canva as a tool to enhance your branding, enhance your brand recognition, enhance the information you're sharing with your audience, have at it. Like do all the things, because it is relatively easy. It has a much lower entry point than Adobe products.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of what you were talking about with the color codes and the logos, you can do that. I think it's called a branding guide, or, so you can save all of that in your Canva setup. And you should still be able to get a Canva for Educators account that has a lot of these advanced features on it. So those were really helpful.
Yeah, so if you need help converting, you have Canva Pro. I love Canva Pro. That's what I had started with. But the more I have used Canva for Education, the more I really like that almost as much. There are some nuances and a little bit of differences, but Canva for Education really has a robust offering. And so if you don't have Canva for Education in your district, or you don't have Canva for Education, you personally, please let me know. And I'm happy to give you some step-by-steps that I know, and perhaps give you some insight into troubleshooting if you run into trouble. But if you are using the free version, definitely look into Canva for Education, because that branding guide, that ability to upload logos and background remover make it 100% worth it. Also because it's still free.
Yeah. And Canva Pro is really affordable. I think it's $150 a year. So right now, as we're recording this, but so that's awesome. And Canva was created by an awesome woman. Did you know that, Aurora?
Mm-hmm. See,
So
the story, if you have not, I can't do it justice, and I would not want to even try, because the founder of Canva, her story is pretty incredible. So if you like a good story, this is my plug. If you like a good story, do the quick Google search or your favorite search engine and find out the story behind how Canva got started. There's also a commercial, so I'm sure it's on YouTube as well. But it is just one of those things that you hear about and you go, how brilliant that someone would find a solution in this method. And now, instead of like hoarding it, because that's sort of human nature, share it widely. And so I like to think of that as maybe they're like mind to school PR. We all are super open and super willing to share tips and tricks and resources, and you need help with something, you want to brainstorm something, there is no better community than the school PR community. And I'd like to think that she would fit in really well with us.
yes, amen. I totally agree. I was a complete outsider when I got started, and people just welcomed me in. So kind of as we wrap up, Aurora, what are some of the projects that you're most proud of? Because I'd love to maybe link a few things in the show notes for everybody to kind of take a look at as we're talking about some of these graphics.
Yeah. So some of the ones that I didn't expect to feel such pride for when I was making it is we did some COVID related things that really were well received, were informative, that my husband was like, you can see your improvement in graphic design by looking at this particular one that you did, which is like, I'm so honored. But also, I've done some things that are kind of posters. We did you're essentially a "You Are Welcome Here" poster series when we returned to our buildings, and walking into a building and seeing something that you made there, and it's not graffitied, nobody's written all over it. It was really kind of heartwarming, just because I honestly never thought that would be something that I would have happen. And I'm happy to share probably 4 or 5 resources at least, and I'll share them as templates. The it should work because it's all done through Canva for Education. But again, you may want to customize some of those things to be your own. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Please know that if I'm sharing a resource, that it's something that I expect you to take and update and change and tweak. And if you make it even better, share it back with me because I'd love to see it.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. As we kind of wrap up, what would you say is your best social media tip?
Oh man, that is a great question. I think my best social media tip is um, to remember that though we are all human and we all are going to make mistakes and typos happen, it is even with the societal feelings we have right now, that you are going to have to find a way to move forward. And dwelling on it is not good for anybody. So there's, the apologize, the, oh gosh, thank you so much for catching that. We're so honored that you are reading our stuff so closely. This is amazing. Whatever it is that is relevant to your constituency, but don't dwell on it. Don't delete it because that just asks for more trouble. But find a way to balance. Social media is going to evolve. I mean, we all are sort of wondering, like, what is going to happen with Twitter? Will Apple renew the app, or does that disappear? And then if it does, what comes next? I think everybody for the last few years has sort of been wondering, like, what will replace Facebook? What will replace Twitter? And though the platform will change, the methods of good communication, the methods of having conversations with your stakeholders, stakeholder input, those are basics of public relations forever. And though how we deliver that may change, as long as you adhere to those best practices to the best of your ability, and nobody's 100% of the time, but as long as you adhere to those from a basic standpoint, then you're going to grow your audience and be successful no matter what platform you're sharing it on.
Yeah, definitely. Great advice. And of course, doing social media for almost 9 years now, I've made my fair share of mistakes. You have to get beyond them. Aurora, what's the best way for our listeners to stay connected to you?
So the best way for listeners to stay connected with me is to either find me on LinkedIn, of which I will happily share my LinkedIn profile. And then because your listeners are really wonderful and you have grown such a fantastic school PR community, I'm willing to share my personal email address. I'm happy to answer as much as I can and share as much as I can. I like to think that I didn't collect all this knowledge and conduct all this research to not share it, to not teach and share it forward, but that I ask you to do the same, to welcome that new person in the same way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll leave your email address in the show notes. Everybody take a look over there. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. This was really insightful. A lot of great ideas for our listeners to think about. So thanks so much for spending time with us today.
You're so welcome. Like I said, it was my honor and I enjoyed every moment.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Keep telling those stories.